प्रतिबोधविदितं मतममृतत्वं हि विन्दते आत्मना विन्दते वीर्यं विद्यया विन्दते मृतम्.
Indeed, one attains immortality by awareing the consciousness through every experience. Through one's self, one attains power. Through knowledge, one attains immortality. So the word here is amritam. Mritam. So again, amritam means immortality in this context. Mritam. One attains immortality. Now, when we talk about immortality, it is not the immortality that you are thinking about because you watched some superhero movie or you read some article, Silicon Valley, where everyone wants to be immortal, live forever. When we're talking about immortality, what they're actually talking about is a state of self-realization. So immortality, in essence, means deathlessness, right? You don't die, as it were. And we often say the self never dies. The self always is. So if there's no death, that means there's no birth. See, a person dies and then is born, or a person born and then dies. So everything we know about the world, including our own existence, centers around the idea of there is a coming into a manifestation, going out of manifestation. We call that coming into manifestation as birth, going out of manifestation as death. You look at it in the cycle of the day. What's happening in the morning? As the sun rises, the night dies, and the morning is born. And then the sun courses through the sky, and the day comes to an end. The day dies, and the night is born. Seasons, this is happening. Thoughts, this is happening. Every aspect of our existence, this is happening. Now, when they talk about a state of immortality, means this is no longer happening. This birth and death. Because in this process of birth and death, what we notice is change. So the boy changes into a teen. The boy dies, the teen is born. The teen dies, the young man is born. The young man dies, the old man is born. And so it goes on. There's this element of change. So when we say immortality, what we mean is deathlessness, birthlessness, changelessness. These are all descriptions of the truth, the reality, Brahman. So, indeed, one attains immortality by awareing the consciousness through every experience. See, we are so enmeshed, so entangled with every aspect of that changing phenomenon we call the world. Why? Why are we so caught up in this changing phenomenon? Anybody? What binds us to this world? What makes us a slave to this worldly existence?
Can it be our desires?
Yes, desires, that's general, yeah. Desires. Desires bind us. Desires of what? Desires pertaining to what?
Acquisition, enjoyments.
One of the motivations. Yes, Karishma?
Is it because we look to the world to find like this happiness or fill this void that we perceive to have?
Yes, yes. But then that's kind of flipping the question on its head again. Why are we bound to the world? Because we're looking at the world to find fulfillment. You see? What binds us to this world? And when we release, or should I'll put the question in a different way. Our vasanas, this is similar to desires. When we are released from this bondage, we are liberated. When we are freed from these, we gain liberation. These bind us.
Is it the body, mind, and intellect?
Excellent. There you go. Yeah, you just need a little prompting. So it's the equipments that bind us, actually. Not actually the equipments. It's the identification with the equipments. That identification with the equipments is so complete that we are bound by this limitation of change. Body, mind, intellect, perceptions, actions, emotions, and thoughts. So you take away perceptions, actions, emotions, and thoughts, actually there's no world. The world is made up by things you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feelings, thoughts, all go to constitute the world. Is one way of saying that is what the world is. So you identify with the equipment, you're bound to the world through these equipment, and then what happens? You're constantly affected by changes within those equipments. Constantly changing, and that's why we're constantly affected. Whether it's at the physical level, whether it's at the emotional level, whether it's at the intellectual level. Change is always happening. And we're bound to that changing aspect. We ourselves will have to endure the changes, which most people are not prepared to deal with. For the simple reason is they are entrenched in their likes and dislikes. Something moves out of their particular range of likes into an area that they don't like. It's a meltdown. I want my luggage here with me. Sorry, you can't have that. Not today. Not for the next 48 hours. So entrenched, so attached to that particular thing. So as soon as someone attains enlightenment, all they've done is essentially, to put it technically, they have stopped identifying with the equipments. Let's see, for all purposes, a person realizes, and the argument is always put forward, especially in this class, it seems to be a popular argument. Yes. But the person is still there. He is a realized person sitting there. You say he doesn't have body, mind, intellect, but I see him. He sees me. So, yes, the equipments are still there. It's not on realization like a genie disappears. The identification with the body, mind, and intellect, with the perceptions, actions, emotions, and thought, those dissolve. There's no more identification there. That is a state of enlightenment. You see, one way you can think of it is, relatively speaking, as soon as you are detached from something, right? Now, You'll have to all come up with your own example. I don't know what you're all detached from. I'll give you a list of everything you are attached to, for sure. But something you must have detached from. I'm pretty sure everyone is detached from something. Chocolate. Karishma, did you say chocolate? I'm not a lip reader. Chocolate. Okay. Karishma is detached from chocolate. She is just risen in spiritual stature, you know. Yeah, I'm ashamed to tell you how much chocolate I ate before class. Detached from chocolate. Anyway, everyone is detached from something, right? Now, detached doesn't mean you don't take that particular thing. You may still enjoy chocolate, in fact, but chocolate cannot supplement your happiness anymore. Whether it's there, okay. If it's not there, it doesn't make a difference. I'm not going to miss it. Now take that to the nth degree and apply it to your own body, mind, intellect. Okay, so the body doesn't get catered to. It doesn't get its favorite thing. So what? Okay, so emotionally, people don't like me. So what? Intellectually, no one appreciates my thoughts or my ideas. So what? You've severed ties. In one way, it's like a mental experiment. This state of amritam, immortality, no identification whatsoever. So, indeed, one attains immortality. So, it's great. Okay, yes, fantastic. You've told us about this state of immortality that exists. Now tell us how to get there. Okay, I gave you a clue. You got to drop the identification with the material equipment. Right. So how do we do that? By awareing the consciousness through every experience. This is an upasana. This is a practice. They call this practice as open eye meditation. Not to be confused with meditation or close your eyes and meditate. Different. This is a spiritual practice called open eye meditation, which, if you want to reach that state of immortality, you will have to practice. Now, what is this open eye meditation? I never heard open eye meditation. Throwing some other practice into the mix here. See, actually, if you're able to get open eye meditation right, there's no need for meditation, in fact. Theoretically speaking. I'll tell you why. Now, what happens here is in open eye meditation, they actually say open eye meditation qualifies you for meditation, but actually, if you're practicing open eye meditation, it's almost as good as being realized if you can practice it to the full. And let's start where we are. So it's based on the principle, as you think, so you become. You know, everyone familiar with that law. As you think, so you become. Fundamental law of nature. Should all be aware of that law. Right. All of us at this point in time are focused on the world. That is where our focus lies, on the world. From the moment you wake up, your focus is on studying. It's in the world. You're studying books. The books are part of the world. Yes, but it's Vedanta literature we're studying. The world. And you start your day, and you do your yoga for your body, and you do your yoga or your mind, and you do your yoga or your intellect, world. This is a spiritual person, not to talk of someone who wakes up scrolling, coffee, mundane things. All right. Either way, focus is on the world. Now, in open eye meditation, what we want to do is we want to try and shift this focus, shift the focus from the world onto the self. Now, how do we do that? We often use this example. If you hold your thumb out, right? Or a finger, you don't have to do it now. And you focus on your thumb. Everything behind your thumb becomes out of focus, right? If you focus on what's behind your thumb, you'll notice that the thumb becomes out of focus. You can't focus on both at the same time, the different depths. And this is exactly what's set up in the world for us. We can't focus on the self and on the world and expect to attune the self. Granted, our focus lies on the world. That's the state we're in. And now we want to draw the focus onto the self. So we need to ensure that the self remains in focus. Again, where is your focus of attention? Is it upon the self, the spirit aspect of your personality? Or is your focus on the matter equipment, the body, mind, and intellect? I wake up, I'm feeling hungry. I need a lift. Body, taste. Whatever it is, there's this constant catering to the equipment throughout the day. Got to go to work, got to earn money, got to get this, got to get that. As I mentioned earlier, acquisition, enjoyment, these motivations driving us into the world, our desires. And nothing wrong with any of these practices, but you could be engaged in those practices purely enmeshed, entangled in the practices, not the practices, but the activities themselves. And this is where most people end up, because they don't have access to this information. Anybody with access to this information would not be caught up. They'd understand, okay, yes, understand, you know, you can function in the world, but that doesn't mean that's where your focus of attention lies. If you're spiritual, you want to shift your focus of attention onto the self, away from the world. Then the world slowly starts going out of focus. It is not that important. You give it a right value. You move into a state of a sakshi, a witness. You start witnessing things go by, unenamored, realizing the limitations of all those pursuits. So when your focus is on the world, on the equipments, you get enmeshed, entangled, involved in those equipments. This is where most people find themselves. So again, we're going to try and extricate ourselves from that, untangle ourselves, detach ourselves from that. So open eye meditation is still going about your functions, your daily functions, your daily actions, perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. But your thought is resting on the self. Constantly, when I'm engaged in an action, the self and living in this action. When an emotion springs up, now we attribute that emotion to the mind. Yes, but what enlivens the mind to feel the emotion is the self. I had a very good idea. My intellect must be sharp today. worldly. I had a very good idea. My intellect must be sharp today. Yes, but what enlivens the intellect to think is the self. So in every action, every perception, every emotion, and every thought, you bring it back to the self as that enlivening principle, giving sentiency to the expression of these equipments. This is open eye meditation. Now, you may think, how is this possible? How is this possible? How can you think of the self while still being in the world? They give the example of the Shruti, Indian classical music. You may have talked about this before. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Indian classical music. It's not easy to listen to. It's very difficult to attune to Indian classical music. But once you do, this is amazing. It takes you to these dizzying heights. Some of the compositions are, if you don't touch the lotus feet of Brahman, then I don't know. Amazing, amazing composition. It's said to be the highest form of music. Very, very spiritual. Composer, some of the compositions are by self-realized persons. So how does one attune to the self while still functioning in the world? And this is where this classical music comes in. Now, in Indian classical music, those of you who have seen it, you'll find that and even when we play the mantras, if you are tuned to it and you know what it is, you'll hear it. Every composition starts with the Shruti. It's that constant like drone that happens in the background. Constant drone that happens in the background. Now, we even using that word drone, it's not a drone. In fact, that establishes, without that, the whole composition falls apart. So within a composition, of course, you've got the beats and you've got the ragas and the talas and you've got all this composition going on. But all those, every single musician is tuning into that baseline beat, as it were. It's not a beat. It's just a that very low frequency sound. And the guy is just basically sitting there and it looks like he's almost doing nothing. Now they have little boxes and you can just put the box on and it'll play that Shruti. Believe me, I'm no musician or Indian music specialist here. I'm just telling you all that I know. Limited knowledge in Indian music. Anyway, that Shruti, all the musicians are tuned to that. You'll find if that guy that is playing the Shruti, one thing goes off, everybody's off. It knocks the whole thing out because they're all aligning to that. But they're all playing their different tunes and beats within that composition, right? The violinist goes, the drummer or the tabla player, different beats. But, hey, Vasu, don't laugh. I'm going to make you do Tabla sounds next time I see you.
No, you're doing well, Greg.
And anyway, so they all attuning to this Shruti while they're constructing their various parts of the greater composition. If you don't understand that example, I apologize because I don't have any more. This is how, see, it's classical music. This is classical living, is attuning to that self. Now, of course, it's indicated as a practice. But in all honesty, that practice becomes stronger as you fortify yourself with this knowledge. The more entrenched, and that's not the best word because I just use it in a negative sense, the more entrenched, the more exposed you are to this philosophy, to this knowledge, the more you can live classically. Automatically, what happens is you pick up that divine attunement. You start attuning to that reality in and through your activities. One of the ways, one of the methods we say, or we're told that is helpful to establish this classical way of living is synchronization. So whether you are jogging or riding a bicycle or rowing a rowing machine at the gym, whatever it is, start attuning that. I am the self. I am that reality. In and through these actions. What is that self? That self is in living these actions of the body, perceptions of the mind. I see that sunset. What enables me to see that sunset? So you start, in effect, this is exactly what we're talking about in chapter 4. Various ways by which we can attune to the higher. Attune to that reality. As soon as you have an appreciation, or even just that thought pops up, you could be at your desk and you could be getting very irritated with the boss for having given you this job that you have to do. Or maybe you yourself have given yourself that job that you have to do, even though you don't like doing it. And you're very proud that you're doing the thing that you don't like doing. Shows evolution. In that practice is not what I am writing, I am calculating, I am figuring out, but that which enables me to calculate, assess, or figure out. Even if you can just have that thought is enough. Because that thought will start taking root. But you have to attune yourself to it. You have to attune yourself to classical living. We always talk about spiritual pursuits, spiritual practice. It's not being something you do on a Wednesday evening or on a Sunday morning or on weekends or on weekdays or on every second weekday. Spiritual practice is a full-time awareness. You will have to develop that awareness. Awareness of what? Awareness of that divinity. Within, without, however you do it. Just an awareness of that divinity, that self, that Brahman, composing and enlivening your entire experience. Then you start becoming spiritual. This is what the practice is, open eye meditation. As you start gaining momentum in this, as I mentioned earlier, you become a witness. Because you realize the limitation in the pursuit of the equipment. You realize the limitation in the world. The world is so limited in the happiness, the satisfaction that it can provide you. Oh, but this thing, terrible thing happened. So what? Oh, this amazing thing happened. Is that so? Is that so? Remember the Chinese philosopher. Is that so? Is that so? All it is a stance of objectivity. Relatively speaking, it's just objectivity. You're being objective. That's it. Extreme objectivity is sakshi, witness. Witnessing all life activities go past, not getting involved. Not getting involved doesn't mean you don't participate. No, I'll sit this one out. No, I'm not interested in that. No, you play your part. You play your role. Whatever that is, you determine that. Brings us back to the king of Persia. Once in Persia reigned a king who upon a signet ring carved a maxim, true and wise. All remember that? Even this shall pass away. It's the epitome of objectivity. So you become objective when you practice this, because you are realigning yourself. You're realigning the personality, as it were. It's not correct terminology, but you're realigning yourself to the self. When your focus of attention goes on to the self, the world becomes out of focus. Not so important. Now, again, this should not be misunderstood as callousness. No, I don't care. What is the world? Doesn't matter. No, but, the kids got to be picked up from school at 4:30. What kids? I'm sure they'll find their way home. No, we're not talking about that. You have your obligations and your roles to fulfill in life. You still got to fulfill them. But you do it with a sense of detachment. This is the route to immortality. Indeed, he says, indeed, one attains immortality by awareing the consciousness through every experience. This is the idea of open eye meditation. It has to be through every experience. Whatever you're doing, again, not part-time, pastime. The constant awareness of that reality in and through every experience. Through oneself, one attains power. Through knowledge, one attains immortality. Now, when he says here, through oneself, one attains power, what he means is, if you practice this, you develop a sense of objectivity within the world, right? Relatively, you're objective. In fact, the only way to gain true power, the only way to gain true enjoyment, the only way to gain true success in the world, believe it or not, is to be objective. How do I be successful in objectivity? How do I enjoy objectivity? How objectivity? relatively, to even get power, you have to be objective. Then he says, through knowledge, one attains immortality. So when you get knowledge of the self, you become a sakshi. This is an absolute state of objectivity. When even the equipment, you're objective to the functioning of the equipment. In other words, there's no identification with the equipment whatsoever. You're sakshi, witness to the play going on in front of you. Life's drama. You just become a witness. But she said, but this one is corrupt. But on and on it goes. The drama of life. Is even a drama you can enjoy, no? A movie, you all watch dramas. I'm sure you've all watched dramas, movie dramas, right? Rotten Tomatoes, 7 out of 10. 8, I'll give it 8 out of 10. It's a drama. Main character died. Drama, tragedy, real drama. Brilliant, brilliant movie. Okay, easy enough to do in a movie because you're objective to what's going on the screen. Transfer that into your life. Yeah, whole world becomes one enjoyment. No, honestly, it's your whole world becomes enjoyable, even in, excuse my language, cuck times. Even when times are tough. When times are tough, times are hard, you still enjoy it. You're making sense up to now, Craig. Now, yeah, I think you've gone off, yeah. Just in the same way you watch a tragedy and you enjoy it, your life can be a tragedy and you can enjoy it. No, honestly, if you're objective. No, because it's not the whole life is one tragedy. There's various parts to your life. One is tragedy, one is inspiring. It's an inspiring story. Part of it is a funny story, like that. It's coming and going. Not the whole life can be a tragedy. It's impossible. Life is pairs of opposites. At least that much you should know. So, yeah, tragedy for now. Might as well enjoy it. Something will happen later. That too I'll enjoy. This is possible if you're objective. I'm genuine. No, there's no funny business here. I'm explaining the verse here. Through oneself, one attains power. You want to achieve anything in the world, it's through objectivity. That you must recognize. That you must recognize. It is only through objectivity that you enjoy. It is only through objectivity that you gain true power. But if you want that immortality, that's through knowledge. All right. Any questions?
Oh, Craig, it's Mark here. How's it? Yeah, I remember when we did Vedanta treaties, we spoke about objectivity, and I battled with it then, and I'm still battling with it. And the reason is, that word objective is so tightly coupled, to my mind, almost inseparable from science. And we know that science is very limited, and it's not really going to help us understand the self or the absolute or the unknown. So,
but what's pegging your... Why are you relating being objective to science?
Because I think, I mean, in the English language, and in our culture, I mean, objective has a definite sense of a lack of, it's not being intuitive or having an intuitive understanding of something, but my understanding is the only real way to actually even grasp the self is through intuition and not through like cold objective intellect, which a scientist would have.
Well, in truth, the self cannot be grasped through any equipment. It is a becoming, if that's what you mean. What becomes the self, correct. Now, I can see where you're getting confused, because I know in the VT and even in the four Vedanta treatises and even in the Fall of the Human Intellect, it talks about subjective science as Vedanta, as discovering your inner self, the inner mechanisms of your personality, as a subjective science. And then he talks about objective science as everything pertaining to the world. So I can see where that confusion would lie. But when we talk about objectivity, one way we can define objectivity is just by sheer application of the intellect at all times. And that intellect being applied at all times with the correct understanding, the understanding of spiritual truths, enable us to gain an insight into the true nature of things. Right, so we develop an insight as to what the value, we develop a right understanding and value for the world that we're interacting with. Once that understanding is thoroughly ingrained within us and we understand the limitation of everything that the world can provide us with in terms of our well-being and happiness, that gives us a sense of objectivity, because we're able to view it from almost a better angle, a better view. It's like this. If you're on the surface of the earth, it's rocky and undulations and ups and downs. But even if you rise just above the surface, you had a hovercraft or a glider, and you don't have to go into space, but you're just above the surface. Even the stage before that, you get some good suspension. All of a sudden that ride is more pleasant. If you get above that and you're in your glider, those undulations and ups and downs are still happening below you, but you're objective because your viewpoint has gone up. It's like when you're on the ground and you're in it, it's all very, very hectic. You're a part of it. You're entangled in it. You're involved in it. You lack objectivity. See, the opposite of objectivity is involvement. So you're involved because you're so attached to these equipment. As soon as you're able to extricate yourself out of that, lift off the ground, all that's happening on the ground is not really affecting you anymore. It's still there. Yeah, you can still see the undulations, the rocky surface, the pothole in the road, the puddle, and all of that. It's still all there. Not that it's been removed, but you're just looking at it from a different angle. Now it's not affecting you because you're riding far above it. But then even those valleys or those canyons, you go to another height and you look, when you look out the plane and you flying from Durban to Cape Town, or Johannesburg to Cape Town, there's a remarkable landscape below you. And I know there are areas where there's mountains. It all looks flat. What a nice view from up there. Similarly, it's an analogy. This is what happens as soon as you develop objectivity. All the trials and tribulations and everything that affects you now, it's not that they go away. This is that you're not affected by them anymore because you've grown in stature. You've developed a deeper and thorough understanding of what life's all about. That gives you that sense of objectivity. That allows you to gain a sense of peace and happiness, stability, in and through the fluctuation. They're all still going on. All the activity that's happening on the land, in those canyons, it's all happening when you're flying over them. It's stopped. It's all still happening. But are you affected? Sipping your cool drink on the plane? Totally unaffected.
Yeah, unaffected. Yeah, I suppose unaffected in that way relates to, but it still sort of relates to that detached coldness. There's just such a coldness to the word, and maybe it's just my stuff, but or my understanding of the English language, but there's just a yeah, anyway, I'll try to get over it.
You can pick another word that resonates with you. If you understand the concept, Mark, then use a word that is going to make more sense to you, that doesn't trigger these negative connotations, because it's definitely not something, the word itself shouldn't trigger something negative, because objectivity is definitely a value. It's a very, very high value to achieve. So if a word that can be, put in there instead of detachment, because objectivity and detachment is essentially the same thing, but if you can put in a word there that doesn't, strike these hard chords with you, then by all means do that. If you understand the concept, then it's permissible.
Okay, thanks, Craig.
Sure. Okay,